These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, a poet's representation and challenge by Haki and Magabudi. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal and break the creator and unto, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the mother Emmanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina. Those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, legal pundits, plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in this thing. Encouragement, gathering lives, warped consciousness, confirmation, or aid historically news, and yeses from millions of the nation proudly wearing this way to the Confederate flag above their hearts and flying in all of its traitorous glory over the state capitol and institutions. History and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race, and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation who words in the highest office of the land. This is written by Obama's president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of Black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor of the Bible school. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emmanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Shanzer in their New York Times op-ed Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the malicious neo-Nazis and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with internal connections, including international connections. Morris Dees and J. Carlson also writes in the New York Times, an article, Racist Without Borders, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder of Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of deranged racists or zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Ruth told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the civil rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people. A white genocide must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, "A lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith," end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland,
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, greetings from, what was the old line from Firesign Theater back, waiting for the electrician or someone like him? It's hotter than Hooker and Heater, and hotter than Heater in Hellville, where the high is predicted to be 109. Well, it's going to be 114 here today, and the building that we're doing our program from, their air conditioning croaked yesterday when it hit 114. And so we're sitting here in a 96-degree studio, doing this show. So, apologies for the way it looks and how, sweat-soaked I am, but we're here, and we're not going anywhere. One of the things that I find so striking about this, frankly, and, let me just toss it open to your comments on this as well. Joyce finally got a fan fired up. If you hear a little noise in the background, it sounds like an airplane taking off. That's a fan. Anyhow, if you have any thoughts on this, what I'm about to say, I'd love to hear from you, 202-808-9925. I'm watching TV, and all I'm seeing is disaster porn all the time. Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible thing that 150-plus people are dead down in Florida. And, I'm going to wait until they've declared everything done and they have some, preliminary estimates on exactly what happened there before I weigh in with opinions. I think probably today is a little too early for that. But there are other things happening, and one of them is this massive heat dome over the Pacific Northwest that is starting to creep toward Idaho and Montana. That is global warming on steroids, that is shutting down this city. Nate spent much of the weekend out trying to get water to homeless people. This is a real crisis. I mean, I have no idea how much wildlife has died over the weekend. I know that our plants are dying. And, thank God we still have power. But, this is, and I'm not trying to make it like, oh, gee, this is all about us here. This is huge, right? I mean, this is extending from central Canada all the way down to Northern California. And from out in the Pacific, where the blob of warm water that seems to be one of the things that's driving this thing, which just started appearing in the last decade, starts all the way toward, well, it's heading toward the Rockies now. And I'm assuming it'll probably break up as it goes east. But I guarantee you, if this was happening in New York City right now, it would be the lead story. But, hey, Wolf's gone to Florida, and everybody's down in Florida, and everybody's talking about that. It's a crime, and it's a shame, and Governor DeSantis recently had his deregulation-a-thon, where he invited people from various industries to come in and tell him which regulations to cut. And one of the industries that was represented were the real estate developers who wanted fewer regulations on how they build buildings. But like I said, I'm gonna pause that topic until tomorrow, because you want, frankly, what I would say to the network executives who are making the decision to run with one building fell down all the time, as if that's some kind of a national story. I mean, it's a terrible local Florida story, like I said, but is this a national story, really? But the reason they're doing this is because we have this if it bleeds, it leads media. And meanwhile, the planet, I mean, literally millions of people a year are dying from climate change right now as we speak. And I'm just boggled by it. Why are we watching disaster porn instead of hearing about climate change? It's a real thing. And in fact, the Axios is writing about this today. They said such events have proven to be especially deadly. There was a heat dome like this in Europe, you'll recall, in 2003. These are fairly rare events. They're not supposed to happen at all. But the one in 2003 killed 70,000 people in Europe. Which is why I'm saying if this wasn't just Portland and Seattle, but was New York City and Washington, D.C., it would be the #1 story in the world, which is incredible. Canada set an all-time record, and buildings just aren't built for this heat, as I can tell you from sitting here in our building in northern Portland, where the building's AC has failed, and so here we are. The rant that I wrote, which I think is kind of apropos to this, for Hartmann Report today, HartmannReport.com, is that Democrats need to defy this bizarre white trust fund, Mr. Doughboy baby, trust fund baby Tucker Carlson. He's the heir to the Swanson food fortune. And according to him, he spent his college years mostly drunk, and he's going after General Mark Milley for saying that people in the military need to know the history of the country that they've sworn their lives to defend. This is, this is just how Mark Milley, 39 years in the military. He's got a master's degree, Mark Milley, from Columbia University in international relations. This guy is and he's got 2 master's degrees, one from there and one from the Naval War College. And on this Fox so-called news program, Carlson says, oh, he's not just a pig, he's stupid. Now, why would Carlson say that? Well, #1, Milley is teaching the history of race in the United States. And #2, Milley's boss, Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, is black. So, of course, Fox is going to go all nuts all the time about Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin, and so is the right-wing media and the right-wing press. And it's just wrong. I mean, you can draw a straight line from those 2 realities, the fact that Milley is teaching the history of race in America, and his boss, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, is black. You can draw a straight line from that to conservative media and conservative politicians' newfound hatred for the military. Remember, they loved cops until the cops tried to stop them from overthrowing the country on January 6th? Then they started hating cops. You had Officer Fanone, the guy who had a heart attack because he was tased repeatedly in the back of his neck and beaten mercilessly as he was trying to defend the Capitol on January 6th. He met with Kevin McCarthy over the weekend, or perhaps it was Friday, but in the last couple days. And, walked out. And what was his comment? The press said, well, what do you think? And he said, I need a drink. McCarthy, he was saying to McCarthy, why don't you encourage your colleagues to not lie, at the very least, about what happened on January 6th. And McCarthy was like, well, maybe I'll talk to them privately, but I'm not going to say anything in public. And so, I'm just, Kevin McCarthy is terrified of Donald Trump. He knows that if Trump just says the word, he'll have a primary opponent in California, and he won't be, the House Minority Leader, set to be possibly the House Majority Leader in 2022, which brings me to the point of my whole rant over at Hartmann Report, which is that this whole white supremacist conservative movement, if the Democrats cannot demonstrate to America that they can get things done, if Democrats can't get out there and actually make things happen, which in my opinion means blowing up the filibuster and just start passing some damn laws. Do the exact same thing Mitch McConnell did. He wanted to put Brett Kavanaugh, Mr. Justice Beerbong on the Supreme Court. There was no way he was going to get 60 votes to do it, because the Democrats would have filibustered it, which they've done going back. I mean, they filibustered Robert Bork when Ronald Reagan was president. And afterwards, everybody said, yeah, that was a damn good idea. Bork is nuts. So to block the filibuster, Mitch McConnell changed the Senate rules and said, okay, filibuster doesn't apply to Supreme Court justices. Well, the Democrats control the Senate. Get rid of the damn filibuster. Come on, Chuck Schumer. Come on, Joe Biden, President Biden. You have the tools. You can start threatening Democrats who are saying, oh, we like the filibuster. We think Republicans being in charge is a good thing. You can say to them, oh, really? Well, do you like your committee assignments? Do you like your seniority? Would you, and say, that's the stick approach. The carrot approach would be, hey, how would you like an extra committee assignment? How'd you like to have, some major infrastructure in your community with your name on it? We can make that happen. I mean, this is, old-timey politics. LBJ, FDR, they all knew how to do this. Joe Biden knows how to do this. He served in the Senate for almost 30 years, or in the neighborhood of 30 years. I'm telling you, and by the way, on the program today, Rachel Bidkofer is going to be with us. How do Democrats win? That'll be in our third hour, I believe. I'm just looking. Oh, it's in the second hour, Sean? Thank you. And Andrew Perez is going to be here in the, that's also the second hour, about health care insurance, a new way to say no to health care. And in our third hour, Dr. Justin Frank is going to drop by, and I'm going to be asking him, is Trump's mental illness contagious? It sure seems like it. So some of the things we're going to get to today. But I'm telling you, if the Democrats don't get their act together and start passing legislation and making things happen, they are not going to hold the House and Senate in 2022. And if they don't hold the House and Senate, they won't hold the White House in 2024. And if they don't hold the White House in 2024, you can kiss democracy in this republic goodbye for at least a generation. Because these Republicans and the billionaires, the neo-fascist, white supremacist billionaires who support them and own them, essentially, are not going to let go.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So that's what's on my mind and what's happening here in Portland, Oregon. What's on your mind, and how hot is it where you are? We'll be right back. And welcome back, Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's where, you got a problem, Tom, because the whole thing is Donald Trump said there is no global warming. This is all a problem of the fake news. So the whole thing is where you are not sweating out there.
Right. Well, it's not just Trump. It's the entire Republican Party. There's no global warming.
I'm dripping sarcasm.
I get it. And so am I, along with sweat. But what we have to recognize, Rob, is that there is a reason why these Republicans are saying this, and it's because the right-wing billionaires who made their fortunes with fossil fuels, and the most high profile, of course, were historically Charles and David Koch, but there's a bunch of others. And the industries that they're, that they collectively own and run have been for 50 years now shoveling lies and BS at us, saying that there's no such thing as climate change and there's nothing to worry about and this is normal and plants like carbon dioxide and, we need more coal-fired power plants and, quack, 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 quack. And it's just, it's the same stuff that I was talking about just a minute ago, that if the Democrats don't start getting this situation under control, the way that we're going to lose in 2022 and 2024 is that Democratic voters are going to do the exact same thing they did in 2016 when they felt that Hillary Clinton was only going to go halfway, that she was more of a corporate Democrat than a progressive, and they just didn't show up to vote. Voter turnout was down by over 100,000 votes in Wisconsin. It's for example, as in fact, I think it was over 200,000, as Mark Pocan has pointed out on this program a couple of times. So
the only thing I got to bring up is I know somebody up there in Seattle, and the whole thing is I gave him the spiel that I just gave you. Guess what he'd finally do? He says, "You're finally waking up."
Yeah. Well, in the Pacific Northwest.
That's a mental.
But there's a media blackout on what's going on up here. I mean, I'm telling you, it's all about one building down in Florida. This is a local Florida story. It is probably going to end up being about corrupt developers and a dysfunctional homeowners association and corrupt building inspectors. And God only knows, it's going to be some intersection of that stuff. But this is a local story. Global climate change is not just a national story, it's a worldwide friggin' story. And why the media is doing disaster porn on a local Florida story for hours, it's all I flip back and forth between MSNBC and CNN, and it's all that anybody is playing. And yeah, it's a terrible thing. Sure, it's a car wreck writ large, and I get it. When there's a car wreck and your local TV station shows up and they're using the jaws of life to get mom and little kid out of the car before it bursts into flames, it's a big deal, right? But that's a local story. Anyhow, Rob, forgive me, I'm ranting. Has the heat hit you guys in Minnesota
You're
yet?
doing your best, Tom. You're just like usual, let me tell you. And I got to be able to put it to you. It's where I hope you guys finally cool down because you deserve it. It's where none of you guys are used to these temperatures.
Yeah, thank you. No, nobody is used to 114 degrees. I mean, outside of Death Valley in Las Vegas. And it's hotter here right now than it is in Las Vegas.
Unbelievable.
Which is absolutely insane. What's the temperature in Minnesota, Rob?
Right now, we got 74 degrees.
Oh, geez. I'll take it.
I'd give it to you if I could put it in an envelope.
Incredible.
Thanks, Tom.
Rob, thanks a lot. It's good to hear from you. 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. I got a couple of stories here to share with you, and I'll be picking up your phone calls right after this. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program from a very warm studio. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a couple of special things over at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com. Of course, at HartmannReport.com, every single day, well, 6 days a week, Sunday accepted, I write a rant about an issue of the day that I think is important. Louise and I work on these together. We get them out typically around 6 in the morning Pacific time. And you'll find that at HartmannReport.com. It's free. You can sign up for it. There's no ads, whatever. But also over at ThomHartmann.com, we have a video every week for the supporters of our program. And the one this week is about how Wisconsin is trying to remove, in fact, they just got permission from their Supreme Court to remove 188,000 people from the voting rolls because they haven't voted in 4 years. This highlights the importance of getting to know who is your state representative, who is your state senator, and communicating with them regularly. It's all over at HartmannReport.com and ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a heads up to our radio stations, our affiliates, people watching us on Free Speech TV, YouTube, and whatnot. We have 2 cameras in the studio here. One of them just died from the heat. It's pushing 100 degrees here in our studio because we had no air conditioning all day yesterday in the studio, and you know, not that we were here, but the water cooler, which isn't a cooler, it's a 5-gallon water thing on a porcelain thing in the back room. That water is so hot that it's almost uncomfortable to drink. It's approaching body temperature. And so we may start experiencing equipment outages here. So if you hear us flip into a best of show or something like that, just, you know, advance warning, that will be what happened, because we just had a camera fail. And you know, if computers start failing, it's going to be ugly. Just a couple of quick stories here, and then I want to pick up your phone calls. And number one, remember when the Republicans all over the country were going, oh my God, nobody wants to work, and nobody wants to work because we're giving everybody $300 a week in extra unemployment benefits. And so, you know, like 12 or 15 Republican states immediately, 26 states, including Missouri, have decided to cut that benefit. So this week, and in some of those states last week, people stopped getting their $300 checks. And because Republicans said, once we starve them out, they'll show up for work. Well, turns out, this is from the New York Times, workforce development officials say they have seen virtually no uptick in applicants since the governor's announcement, this is in Missouri, which ended a $300 weekly supplement to other benefits. And the online job site Indeed found that, it's a company called Indeed, found that in states that have abandoned the federal benefits, clicks on job postings were still well below the national average. It's not the $300. It's the lack of child care. It's the fear of COVID. It's low wages. It's, I mean, you know, I think a lot of people during this past year just said, hey, I'm going to reevaluate my life. You know, what's really important to me and what's not. So it's all that stuff. And then in Ohio, this last story, this is grim and bizarre. You'll recall that when George Floyd was murdered this was in Minnesota, but still, when he was murdered, it was this 17-year-old girl who stood there for 8, 9, 10 minutes and videotaped the entire thing, or filmed it, or all of those words are anachronistic now, but you know what I mean, caught it on her cell phone camera. And she was the one who let the world know. I mean, if that had not happened, if that young woman had not been able or had been legally afraid of videotaping that, or if the police there were 4 cops on the scene there, right? If one of those police had the legal authority to go around and snatch cameras from people and say, you're committing a crime, or even throw them in the back of a paddy wagon, we never would have known what happened to George Floyd. The official story, you'll recall, the official story that Derek Chauvin and his buddies reported was that, he just seems to have died. He must have been on drugs. And that would be, you know, and it would just, another black guy died. And it would have been a 30-second story, if that. Well, the state of Ohio now, the Republicans in the House of Representatives in Ohio are advancing Bill 22, House Bill 22, that makes it a crime to videotape police officers when they're doing their jobs, without the consent of the law enforcement officer. You are committing a crime if you videotape them. So you have to go up and say, may I please take your picture? And of course they're going to say yes, right? Yes, watch me while I kill this guy.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Okay, we're a little cranked and a little hot and a little sweaty, but we'll be back, God willing, and the computers don't fail, right after this break with your calls.
For our Thom Hartmann Book Club excerpt today, we're reading from Ed Morales' new book, Fantasy Island, Colonialism, Exploitation, and the Betrayal of Puerto Rico. This is from the first chapter. There was never any doubt that the United States wanted Puerto Rico for its own when it began a war with Spain near the turn of the 20th century. Cuba had been in the throes of independence war with Spain, off and on since 1868, and the conflict that began in 1895 seemed ripe for the United States to capitalize on. The sinking of the USS Maine, an American naval ship destroyed by an explosion while moored just outside Havana, fueled American entry into the war. Although there are conflicting theories about the source of the explosion, including the likelihood it was caused by a spontaneous internal fire, William Randolph Hearst's newspaper chain blew up the incident into the perfect catalyst for the United States to enter the conflict. When Theodore Roosevelt entered the fray with his army of Rough Riders, the whole affair came as no surprise to anyone who'd been paying attention to the lust U.S. government leaders and military had long expressed to expand southward and westward. And although the idea of manifest destiny was at the forefront of the political discourse of this period, it's less often observed that the United States' expansionist gaze was saturated with racial language and attitudes, at once desirous of and repelled by Latin America's mestizo mulatto social dynamic. The Haitian Revolution at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th created a U.S. obsession with both Cuba and Puerto Rico because of the potential of a similar black-led revolt on those islands. In 1826, Virginia Senator John Randolph feared that such a revolt would render the southern United States vulnerable to invasion from Cubans in rowboats. For this reason, he objected to the United States participating in the 1826 Panama Congress because American diplomats would have to endure the horror of a U.S. diplomat taking his seat in the Congress, quote, beside the native African, their American descendants, the mixed breeds, the Indians, and the half-breeds, without any offense or scandal at so motley a mixture, end quote. The logic driving this perspective underlined not only the importance of slavery to the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, but also, as Matthew Karp points out in this vast southern empire, the extent to which slave owners and their elected representatives disproportionately shaped U.S. foreign policy. Going back as far as the Haitian Revolution, fear of a successful slave rebellion in the newly formed United States strongly motivated Southern politicians. As Karp mentions, to that end, Presidents Madison and Monroe, quote, used overwhelming force to destroy black maroon settlements in southern Florida, end quote. Fear of slave rebellions also briefly united the interests of American slaveholders and Cuban elites who wanted independence from Spain, but in the late 19th century, after abolition, Roosevelt's forces fought in conjunction with Afro-Cuban armies against their common Spanish foe. The move to wrest Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spain came just as Spain had finally relented to end slavery as a concession to black rebel Cuban armies that had formed to push for independence. In a further move to placate continued unrest on the island, in November 1897, Spain signed automatic charters for Cuba and Puerto Rico, which gave limited home rule governments to both islands. Puerto Rico would gain full representation in the Cortes, the Spanish parliament, and could veto Spanish commercial treaties unfavorable to them while also retaining the rights to set tariffs on imports and exports. In this way, Puerto Ricans were granted a kind of citizenship that allowed self-government grafted on what was left of their Spanish subjecthood. Yet on July 25, 1898, 8 days after the first meeting of the newly formed Puerto Rican Parliament, U.S. troops arrived in the southern port of Guanica and replaced the Spanish flag with the stars and stripes. This date would be remembered over 50 years later when the United States finally followed through on a project to allow Puerto Ricans to have limited autonomy and self-government. But at the time, it was both the end of Teddy Roosevelt's splendid little war and the beginning of the current quandary over what exactly Puerto Rico's new colonial master would do with the island. Although historians agree that there was no pre-existing plan for designating Puerto Rico's status, there was a general belief that Puerto Rico could be incorporated as a U.S. territory and probably would be. This led many to assume that it would follow a similar path to statehood as former territories like Florida and Louisiana. At the very least, it would, by acceding to military control, receive, quote, the advantages and blessings of enlightened civilization, end quote, as Puerto Rico's first military governor, Nelson A. Miles, declared 3 days after the landing of Guanica. Because Cuba was so militarized during its wars for independence, the United States decided to allow it national sovereignty, thinking it could still exert considerable control over the economy because of existing business interests and a ready-made set of Cuban consumers who were already buying Ford Model Ts. But although Puerto Rico had experienced anti-Spanish uprisings in the mid-19th century, in 1898 they did not have nearly the same level of armed mobilization present. So the United States held on to it, particularly because of its geographic location, which would provide the United States with a stronghold on the easternmost tip of the Caribbean. The book is Fantasy Island by Ed Morales. Podcasts are found, and we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We're trying to provide the very best content that we can for you at Hartmann Report and over at thomhartmann.com. And on Hartmann Report, every day, 6 days a week, I write an op-ed. Very often they're my rants, also for the radio and television program. And it's ad-free, commercial-free. It's free. You can sign up. It'll get pushed into your email box. Check it out at hartmannreport.com. And, of course, over at thomhartmann.com, we have our weekly video that we put up every week that, you know, does a deeper dive for people who are members of our program, of thomhartmann.com. And the one this week is about this Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGAR, their new report that almost 20 million Afghans are on the verge of starvation and nobody's talking about it. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls. Ron in Chicago. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Yes, there was a story I heard over the weekend about all these abandoned oil wells across the country, an estimated 2 million that are just sitting there uncapped, giving out methane gas.
Yes, they are off gas, and the reason that they're like that is because the oil drilling companies run the same scam the coal mining companies in the Appalachians have been running for years and years, which is you go in, you extract all the so-called natural resource, all the coal or all the oil. And then when the well is dry, or when you've got a lot of wells that are dry, or a lot of coal mines that are, or seams that are burned out, that are mined out, then you bankrupt your company and start another company. And that way, the company no longer has responsibility for cleaning up the mess. It becomes the responsibility of you and me, the taxpayers. And this is a scam that these companies have been running on the United States for probably all of my lifetime, but they really fine-tuned it in the 1980s. And in fact, our bankruptcy laws have been modified a couple times to allow, to make it even easier for this to happen. And there's no personal liability for the executives in these companies. They just move along, start another company, no problem.
Yeah, so there might be, in the state, there might be 1 or 2 inspectors going around trying to find these oil wells. Which is
and when they do find them, they can't go back to the guy that made $30 million off that oil well and now has that stashed in a Swiss bank account. They've got to go to the state or to the federal government and say, okay, we've got another Superfund site here, which is the same thing. I mean, this is you go back to Love Canal. I mean, this is what the chemical companies have been doing forever too. And you pollute like crazy, you make all your money, and then you bankrupt the company and move on, start a new company. Starting a new company is something you can do in 25 minutes with a lawyer. It is nuts. Ron, I got to move along, but thank you for pointing that out. That's I caught that on I think it was in the Washington Post. I could be wrong, but it was in the media over the weekend, and so appreciate the call. Ron, thank you. Cliff in Santa Clarita, California. Hey, Cliff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Brother Tom, I'm really sorry for what you and your crew are going through, but
hey, it's an adventure, Cliff.
That's what I told Joyce. One day you'll look back on this day and we'll talk about it and laugh. But
yes.
If it's like this tomorrow for you, we'll forgive you if you wear a tank top.
Yeah, had I known, I didn't. When I left home to come to the studio, I did not know, and our landlord should have told us. Frankly, I did not know that I'd be walking into a 97-degree studio, but here I am, and here it is, and we've got 3 fans running here, which is the little buzz you probably hear in the background. But
we'll make it through.
Life goes on.
Through together.
Yeah. So,
okay,
but that's not what you called about.
No. Well, see, I watch the weather, Tom. I watch the local LA news. I watch the weather on cable. They report on record temperatures all over the country, right? Not once do they mention climate change or global warming. It must be the corporate overlords preventing them from using those phrases. I mean, is that what's going on? Because nobody makes the connection.
Not only that, social media sites are censoring anti-pipeline demonstrations as being, inflammatory stuff, right? Climate change, you will not see, floating up to the very top of your social media feeds, stories about climate change or stories about oil pipelines and people's protesting against it, or like the previous caller was talking about with the 2 million
oil wells.
Yeah, the oil wells that are off-gassing methane, which is making this whole situation even worse. I mean, you just won't see it. And this is how. Go ahead.
It's going to make our fight all that much harder.
Oh, and it has for years and years and years.
It is. So, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. Thanks a lot,
Hang in
Cliff.
there.
Yeah, you got it. Good to hear from you. Jim in Chicago. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing today? I feel your pain. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and I'll tell you what, if it ever got that hot, that it is in Portland, and I grew up in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, and when it got up to like 103, 104, we were in the house, blinds closed, swamp cooler blasting.
Jim, I spent a good chunk of the 70s in Phoenix. We did a lot of business. I had a company. We did business with one of our largest distributors was in Phoenix, and he and his wife were very good friends of mine in Louisa's, and we would spend weeks out there at all times of the year. And in Phoenix, well, actually, they lived in Carefree, a little suburb of Phoenix. But in Phoenix, I don't recall it ever getting above 103. It was 114 here yesterday.
That's insane. Yeah, it never got that hot down there. And when it got even close, I think the hottest ever, I remember it being was 105.
Yeah.
And we were all just beside ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just surreal that it's that hot there in Portland.
It is. This is like a disaster movie. It's like, it's like one of those disaster movies where it starts out with, the nice little family and everybody's having their dinner together or something, and they turn the TV on and the TV says, oh, and it's 114 in Portland. And they look at each other going, 114, that's not supposed to be. And then pretty soon it's like, and Lake Michigan just drained into the Mississippi or something. It's the beginning of the disaster movie.
And it makes me just think, all the issues that we talk about, everything that we are concerned about, none of it matters if we don't address climate change, because none of us are going to be here.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least none of our grandchildren.
It's so obvious. But anyway, real quick, I wanted to call about the filibuster. Comment, if we don't get rid of the filibuster, we're done.
Yeah, Republicans will win in 2022 and 2024 if we don't get rid of the filibuster.
Absolutely.
And you've got the billionaires and the hedge funds that are funding no labels and problem solvers who firmly have probably 8 or 10 Democratic senators in their back pocket. And the question is, will Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden, are they willing to take a sledgehammer to that structure? Because that's what it's going to take.
That leads to my question, how do they get rid of the filibuster? Does it require a vote, or do they just change the rules?
The filibuster is simply a Senate rule. In the Constitution, it says both the House and Senate establish their own rules, and traditionally, it doesn't establish in the Constitution how they do that, but the way that they typically do that is the first vote of the new session, which is every 2 years. The first vote of the new session is to ratify the rules, and if there have been any changes in the rules, to ratify those changes to the rules. And one of the rules that the Senate has is that if any senator objects to a piece of legislation or to having a debate on a piece of legislation, that objection will require 60 votes to overcome it, and which is called a filibuster. And so all they would have, and to overcome a filibuster takes 60 votes, but to change the rules takes 51 votes. And the president of the Senate has one of those votes. That's, the vice president, the Kamala Harris. Well, and so they can do away with the filibuster with 50 votes. So the Democrats have the ability to do this. They have the power to do this. Do they have the will to do this? Are they willing to take on the hedge funds and the billionaires who are funding people like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and a few of these other so-called problem solvers? I'm hopeful. I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful. But if they don't, you're absolutely right, Jim. We are toast. And if Democrats become toast, in this era with this Republican Party that has completely sold out to neo-fascists, American democracy and the American Republic is going to be toast for at least, in my opinion, at least a generation. I
agree. And we've got to put pressure on these guys. Like, and when I see these interviews on CNN, MSNBC, stop using big words. Most people don't know what they are. Just speak it how it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Talk to the people. Pull the Republican Party playbook on them.
Yeah.
You know, we need some Matt Gaetz and Marjorie whatever on our side.
Yes, and the closest we've got is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who will speak out, but doesn't do crazy stuff. She doesn't do weird conspiracy theories. She's not nuts like, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I'm not saying that she should be. I mean, God bless her. Thank God there are truth tellers like her and Bernie, in the Democratic caucus. But when you're up against a fire hose of lies and disinformation, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Jim, I got to run, but thank you so much for the call. It's coming up on 45 minutes past the hour. We'll continue picking up your phone calls here. As I mentioned earlier, in our second hour, Andrew Perez is going to drop by. He's with the Daily Poster. There's an amazing story about these emergency room claims. We'll get to that, too. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Helping you win the water cooler wars when the water cooler is cool. Ours is not. It's body temperature. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Meredith in Walsenburg, Colorado. Am I saying that right, Meredith?
Yes, that's close enough.
Okay.
I wanted to tell you that we have 60 degrees here.
60?
And it's because of an Arctic blast. We're getting the opposite of what you're getting.
I'll bet your Arctic blast is what is blocking the movement of air to the west of you, where we are.
Right. I notice we always get the opposite of what you get. You get a drought, we get this.
Right.
And then we get a drought, and you get the wet weather.
Yeah. Well, you look at the weather map of the United States. If you look at the pressure maps, you see that there's this huge high pressure system over the Pacific Northwest, and there's a low behind it and a low in front of it, and so that must be it. But thank you for that.
What a mess. I feel sorry for you.
Well, no, we're good. We'll make it through, and someday this will be a fun story that we'll tell our I don't know who we'll tell if anybody survives this. But we'll do our best. Meredith, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Diana in Sanford, Maine. Hey, Diana, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hi, this is Diana again. We've spoken before. I wanted to talk about the filibuster, and I am hearing that you have a little bit more hope, and I am sad to say this time I am more pessimistic about it. I think Joe Manchin and Sinema, they're just messing with us so bad. I believe that they're taking the corporate money. I think they all are. I think there are more Democrats doing that now than they would like us to think. Yeah. I am even listening to Romney, and I think that everybody, they're not doing the work in Congress. They're just like taking the money on Fox News and
and Romney's a vulture fund billionaire. Yeah, and there was a fascinating piece. I think it was a blog on Daily Kos. Might have been over at DU. I'm not sure, but it was on one of those sites, where just average people post blogs about what's going on in their communities. And this was from somebody in the Democratic Party in Arizona. And what they said is that the Democratic Party in Arizona right now is in an extreme crisis because they are having a very hard time raising money, because the Democratic donors are concerned that money they give to the Democratic Party in Arizona might end up with Kyrsten Sinema. And they are so pissed off at Kyrsten Sinema, they want to make sure that the money doesn't end up in her back pocket, and so they're just withholding funds. And that's going to make it harder for the Democrats to do anything. I mean, it is making it harder for them to do anything in that state, which, of course, is exactly what Republicans want.
I have called everybody under the sun Republicans, McConnells, everywhere. Everywhere you can imagine. I've done everything that you've said. And I do want to share something. This is the power of Fox News and Nextmax. I have had my ex, somebody who's called Biden a communist, my 6-year-old grandson, last week said, I called him, you are Joe Cool. And he said, Joe Biden is out of here. He said, Joe Biden is out of here. We are getting rid of him. He's 6 years old, and he hears that from his other grandparents. Yeah. I am so sad about this and upset.
Yeah,
and I'm losing hope.
You know, we're dealing with a propaganda machine. It's just that simple. Diana, I've got to run, but thank you for the call, and thank you for giving us a shout out from Maine. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. In addition to the free newsletter that we have over at ThomHartmann.com, which gives you literally a link to every story or article I've talked about throughout the day, every day, comes into your email box every day. There's no charge. In addition to that, and my daily rants, which are free of advertising and free of charge over at HartmannReport.com, we also produce a weekly video. This week's video is about how power companies around the country, for-profit power companies 100% of the time, these power companies around the country are making it harder and harder and more expensive for people to install solar in their homes. All kinds of ways of trying to block people from doing this. And increasingly, they're getting support from Republican politicians, both at the local and the state level. It's something that we really need to know about, we need to be paying attention to, and we need to be aggressively pushing back on. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com and at HartmannReport.com. And welcome back, Max in Clackamas. Hey, Max, what's up?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Tom. I'm in Portland here as well, and I'm suffering just the same as everybody else, but probably not nearly as bad as the thousands of homeless people that are living on our streets and roughing it.
Yes.
Rough sleeping. Yeah.
People are going to die from this. We haven't seen any kind of a body count yet, and I would be fascinated to hear what the hospitals in this area are reporting. But when it's 114 for like it was over 100 degrees for at least 6 or 7 hours yesterday, and your body just can't cool. It's heat stroke. Anyhow, back to you, Max.
Yeah, heat stroke, and not to mention when things get hot, especially when things are really hot at night and people have no reprieve, crime statistically rises. When you can't sleep, you kind of go a little, you get frustrated,
irritable. Yeah.
In fact, irritable. A book that everybody needs to read right now is called Life After Warming, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wallace Wells. He goes through and breaks down how climate change is going to impact us in every way, including psychologically. And I want to use your platform here for a moment that, increased heat does tend to put additional psychological stress on people, and there is a measurable increase in suicides during these high temperature events. So just be aware of your resources, and that, as you say, Tom, despair is not an option.
Yeah, no,
but
it's...
One thing we have to talk about, instead of saying sustainability, which has been the buzzword for a long time, I want to talk about survivability, because sustaining the systems that got us here is not the correct option. And frankly, mitigating the impacts of what has happened to the planet at this point is very, very hard to do. Probably unlikely and impossible to do, given human psychology and sociology. So what we need to educate young people now is how to survive past the far end on the x-axis, which usually the climate graphs cut off at the year 2100. Well, there are children alive now who will be 80 years old in the year 2100.
Yeah. My grandson's 3. My granddaughter's 8 months. They will live to see this. And frankly, I'm guessing my children will live. Hell, I'm I'm watching it right now. I'm in the middle of it. It's 100. It's going to be 114 degrees here today, and like I said, this building just was not. This building that we're in was probably built in the 1970s. It certainly was not designed for 114 degree temperatures. This is Portland, Oregon, for goodness sake.
And the awful part is it's this toxic feedback loop of the fact that we burn coal and fossil fuels generally in order to fuel electricity generators that turn AC units, which cool things down. But then, of course, that heats it back up because it's just a cyclical problem.
Right.
And so we absolutely need to focus on survivability. If you ever have Dr. Mann on again, one of my favorite guests of yours is Dr. Mann.
Yeah.
Please, please, please ask him practical advice on how to live in an inhospitably, basically how to live on Venus without a spacesuit. You should just ask him that, because that's what we're headed for.
Give me, Sean, if you can write this down, if you don't mind. Can you give me the name of either the book or the author or both again?
Oh, Tom.
Sean has it. I'm sorry. She did write it down when you said it before, so we're good. Max, we'll check into getting him on, because it sounds like, Michael Mann is a brilliant guy and an expert on climate change, but he focuses on the science of climate change itself, not on, how to build buildings or how to survive or how to do agriculture or all these other things that are all going to change. Right. They are all in the process of changing. We are literally watching them change as we speak. So, anyhow, Max,
capitalists out there.
Say that again?
To any capitalists out there, to any capitalists listening, there's going to be a fortune to be made if you can figure out how to grow food and provide fresh water and desalinate ocean water. So,
yep. Case in point, in a very small way, is Tesla and Elon Musk. I mean, there's a fortune to be made.
Well, look at the billionaires. Instead of saving the planet, they're just trying to leave it. I mean, look at what they're doing.
Oh,
like
I know.
Rats on a ship, right?
Let's blast ourselves into outer space and build a 400-foot yacht. Yeah, I'm with you. Max, thanks a lot for the call. Sean in Los Angeles. Hey, Sean, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to say it might not be all doom and gloom with the abandoned oil wells.
Okay. How so?
There's a company in Canada that's using abandoned oil wells to convert the remaining oil into hydrogen.
Oh, the methane that's coming out?
No, not the methane. When you abandon a well, there's still a lot of oil in there that they can't get to.
Uh-huh.
So they're using a process, pressurized water and igniting it.
Uh-huh.
And the hydrogen rises to the top.
Huh. Interesting.
So the states may be able to make money off of it in the end.
Well, those are the kind of things that'll come down the road. But right now, we are experiencing the consequences of the last 100 years, basically, of burning fossil fuels, and the last 50 years of the fossil fuel companies lying to us about what they knew. And it's getting ugly. It's getting ugly. Sean, thanks for the call. Carla in Brooklyn. Hey, Carla, we just have a minute to the end of the hour. What's up? Carla?
Hi, I'm here.
Hey, I'm here.
Yes, Tom. You started your discussion speaking about Officer Falcone meeting with McCarthy, and basically, it's going to be the same feedback from the Republicans unless there's a significant movement that puts some pressure on them. Between Falcone and the Officer, was it Sletnick family?
Yeah.
The Republican, the Republican, and that family, they're a Republican family. That officer voted for Trump. They're a diehard Republican family. I mean, it's very obvious that the Republican Party, they're just self-dealing and for their own self-interest.
Yeah.
So unless all of the Capitol Hill officers get together and, they should really start a serious movement and expose.
Well, Nancy Pelosi has said that she's appointing a special select committee that will have subpoena power. We'll see who gets on that committee. Carla, I got to run. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartmann. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space discoveries. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. 6 minutes after the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Andrew Perez. He writes for the Daily Poster, David Sirota's daily poster, newsletter, article. I'm not sure exactly what y'all call it. Andrew, maybe you could tell us. DailyPoster.com is the website. Andrew, PEREZDC, or at Daily Poster are the 2 Twitter handles. Andrew, tell us about this brilliant piece. They've been doing it forever about United Healthcare. This was a kind of a one-day story of a few months ago that they were planning on blocking people from using the emergency room, or at least paying for the emergency room. Tell us about this.
Sure. So, yeah, a couple weeks ago, United Healthcare announced this new policy where they were going to start more heavily scrutinizing emergency room visits to assess whether it was, whether these are true emergencies. And so they would then deny or limit coverage in those cases. But what we found is that United Healthcare has been doing, something like this for some time now, where they've been retroactively denying people's emergency room visits, saying that it didn't meet the definition of an emergency, or that, physician documentation didn't support it. And they've done this in some pretty egregious cases that definitely seem like emergencies, or at least where people, had good reason to think it might be an emergency when they went to the ER.
That's incredible. I noticed that there was another article. It wasn't, I don't think it was Daily Poster, but there was another piece that I got in the mail this morning or yesterday about how the union, apparently the oversight group for the unions in New York that handles their health insurance and stuff, just flipped a bunch of union retirees off Medicare, where they were just basically paying for a Medicare Medigap policy. Flip them off Medicare onto Medicare Advantage. This is presumably United Healthcare, and they're the largest Medicare Advantage provider in the country. And so the deductibles went from $1,000 and change to $7,000 and change. And now if you want to have a procedure or show up in the ER, you've got to get the permission of the health insurance company instead of just, what normal people on normal Medicare, you just get whatever you need or whatever you want and Medicare pays for it. I'm not asking you to comment specifically on that, but it seems like there's this much larger trend of the health insurance companies just tightening the screws on anybody that they can control, whether it's retirees who are now being shifted into Medicare Advantage on the, which is privatized health insurance. It's not actually Medicare. It's, these BS policies that were promoted by the Bush administration back in 2005, or whether it's, the story that you're telling. I mean, tell us a story about this kid who had the autoimmune disorder, for example.
Yeah. So we spoke to a physician who brought his son to the ER twice in the span of a couple of weeks because his son was vomiting for several weeks, feeling nauseous, experiencing bad reflux. And I guess while he was at the ER the first time, they did some tests on him. They admitted him, they did some tests, and they found that he had an autoimmune disorder that it had newly onset. It's actually a fairly common one, but it's afterwards, the United Healthcare denied some of the bills here, saying that that it wasn't an emergency, that the physician documentation didn't support that. But this guy is a physician, and he just couldn't believe that this is happening to him. And they left him with $7,000 in bills. United Healthcare did, and one of these hospital staffing companies is now demanding $4,000 from him. Because, they want to get paid one way or another, obviously. And, United Healthcare has denied it so far. And he hired a lawyer who we talked to, and she helped connect us with another one of her patients. But, we found several complaints like this where, people, bring their kids to the ER when they're this family in Washington State brought their young daughter to the ER after, she woke up gasping for air. They called 911. Paramedics said get her to the ER, and she had croup, which is not a fatal disease, but it's one of those things where you're supposed to seek medical care if you can't breathe, especially in children if they can't breathe. So United Healthcare ended up approving that appeal, but that's sort of what they're starting to demand that people actually do. They're saying, if they suspect that that something's not an emergency, they're going to make you perform complete this attestation, they write to them why it is, prove to them it is an emergency. But there are federal rules here where you're supposed to be able to seek emergency care on insurance if you need to, and obviously people who are uninsured are also protected going to the emergency room too. But so there are federal rules here, and some organizations have said this policy might violate those rules, the federal layperson standard, prudent layperson standard, which is this idea that if you think that you're having a serious emergency, that you think it'll, whatever's happening to you can affect your well-being permanently, you should be able to go to the ER. So it's one of the reasons this is even happening is obviously hospitals have grown increasingly expensive. Emergency rooms are one of the most expensive places you can seek care. But, they're there for a reason. Mm-hmm. They are there for a reason, and there are rules that are meant to protect you if you go to the ER.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And in fact, if you go to the ER for some just, hey, I've got an ingrown toenail, they won't let you in. I mean, or they'll immediately say, okay, you're out. But although that would still generate a bill. So we're talking with Andrew Perez, senior editor at the Daily Poster, dailyposter.com. So Andrew, if any of the people who are listening or watching right now and have health insurance through I'm assuming United Healthcare is not the only company doing this, and if they are the only company doing this, within a year it'll be a trend across all of these giant blood-sucking ticks that have attached themselves to the back of our nation, the so-called health insurance companies. If this happens to somebody, what should they do?
Yeah, I would say definitely appeal, definitely write to your state regulator if you're on an individual health insurance plan or a small group plan. And otherwise, the Department of Labor also takes complaints from people on employer-funded plans, which probably would be most people who have health insurance or on employer-funded plans. But yeah, I would say definitely file a complaint if you have an issue. I would say they'll probably, in a lot of these cases, actually accept the appeal. I think the point here is to deny, these claims out, at least initially. I do think they probably expect that people will appeal, but the truth is most people do not appeal. It's not an easy.
Yeah. Whoop. Andrew, did I lose you? Andrew? Andrew's talking, but I'm not hearing him. I don't know what happened. But, Andrew, you made a great point, and if you can hear me, I can't hear you. So hopefully our computers that run the phone systems have not died on us. But anyhow, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing that with us. People can check it out at dailyposter.com, Andrew Perez, DC on Twitter, or Daily Poster on Twitter as well. Andrew Perez. We'll be right back. Thank you, Andrew. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Bill Barr is getting his, shall we say, reputation. He's trying to enhance his reputation. I'll riff about that a little bit after this break. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Johan in Los Angeles. Hey, Johan, what's up?
I hope you're hanging in there with the heat wave.
Yeah, step by step. So far, so good.
Tried to talk about the climate change a moment ago, about half an hour ago. Mm-hmm. And California water usage that Bill Maher mentioned just a moment over the weekend.
Oh, I didn't see his show. What did he say?
Almond is the problem where all the water goes to grow almonds. And rather than going to indoor businesses and residents to get the water.
Oh, yeah. The water wars in California are going to get really bad.
And then the water goes to farming instead of people who living.
Right.
Yeah, and then you have to suffer the heat wave, and then California has to suffer the wildfires.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Yeah, it really and truly is. And
then here's audio from the Pennsylvania Earth Science Teachers Association. There's the audio that's recorded from Penn State, where you have the Professor Mann occasionally comes to your show.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a transcript over here, the audio recording here. Not the Professor Mann, but the undergraduate students recorded this phenomenon.
Right. Yeah. No, it's bad, and it's getting worse. Johan, thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you. Ron in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Ron, what's up?
It's cooler in Phoenix than there. It's only going to be 109 here today. Come over to cool off.
Wow. Wow. And 109, I mean, again, the 70s was, what, 50 years ago? But I was in I spent a lot of time in Phoenix back in the 70s, and I don't recall it ever getting above 103. Am I just remembering, I mean, I didn't live there. Am I just remembering something wrong, or is Phoenix actually heating up also?
Yeah, it's always, I've lived here since 115 at least every year.
Oh, it does?
There's a lot more hot days.
Yeah. Okay. So, go ahead.
Last year, there were 53 days of 110 or more.
110 or more? Wow.
Yeah, last year, 53 days. And this year, we've had 6 days in a row of 115 or more.
Wow.
It hasn't hit the record. The all-time record was in 1990. It was 122.
Yeah, that was a one-day thing, though. But if you look at the trend lines, I'm guessing that it's probably getting hotter there. I know it Excuse me, it certainly is in Death Valley.
Yeah, it's like last year also, there was a record for, I think, 130 days of 100 or more. So there's a lot more hot days.
Wow. Wow. Does it cool down at night for you, Ron? It got down into the mid-80s last night. I just can't imagine the people who are sleeping rough out on the streets.
Well, some days it doesn't get below 90. The record was a few years ago, 96 for low temperature.
96 was the low?
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
Oh, that was the record high, low, in other words.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the low temperature, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
But, I mean, they're not doing things here like other states. They don't encourage solar panels or electric cars. Other states give rebates. They don't do that here.
Well, it's because you got Republicans running your state. Ron, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for the tip. The update, as it were. It's 18 minutes past the hour, coming up on 19 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls and the news of the day in 1 minute. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. We try to have a lot of content over at ThomHartmann.com. And, of course, every day my daily rant goes up at HartmannReport.com. No advertising, no fee or anything like that. You can even get it pushed out to your email box for free. But we also have, podcasts available that are free through wherever your favorite podcast provider may be, or the full 3-hour program. It's a 1-hour podcast, the one that's free out there. There's also the 3-hour podcast available at ThomHartmann.com. And we have a special video this week for supporters of the Thom Hartmann program. It's over at ThomHartmann.com about the 62 worst members of the U.S. House of Representatives and Josh Hawley in the Senate. These are the people who voted against the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which passed the Senate and the House overwhelmingly. But these 62 members of the House did what is just awful. You can check it out at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Alejandro in Miami. Hey, Alejandro, what's on your mind today?
No, Tom, I'm just, as an attorney, I'm obviously disturbed when Republicans always suggest suppressing our First Amendment rights that they're supposed to care about. So, when I heard the thing about Ohio, that they want to, restrict their ability to record cops in public, I was thinking, no, that's a First Amendment violation right away because, just to give you a little quick synopsis of how this works, we have something called the strict scrutiny standard for any laws that might affect fundamental rights, like anything about the Bill of Rights, of course. So what that means, what the strict scrutiny test means, that there has to be a compelling government interest in regulating that speech. So what it means is that the interest has to be compelling, meaning that it's essential or necessary rather than a matter of choice, preference, or discretion. So in other words, under the First Amendment case law, if you're out in the public, in a public thoroughfare, or just out in the public, you have the right, like as a free press or free speech, to record someone. No one can restrict your ability to do that unless it's like a restricted area. But if you're in a public domain, the cops can't just.
I get that, Alejandro, but here's how they're going to get around it. I'm reading from House Bill 22. You have committed a crime if you, and let me just quote here, because it looks to me like what they're doing is they're creating kind of off-ramps from the strict standard that you're talking about. You are committing a crime if you, quote, interfere with or obstruct a law officer in a manner that does any of the following. A, inhibits or restricts the law officer's control of a subject or detainee. B, deprives the law enforcement officer of control of a subject or detainee. Or C, without the consent of the law enforcement officer, enters or places an object or substance into a space around the law enforcement officer that is large enough that the law enforcement officer cannot reach a person outside of the area. Over at the lawandcrime.com blog, they're just basically saying that, depending on how it's interpreted, of course, that videotaping police could be considered that, or it could fall into another provision of law that says you have committed a crime if you fail to follow a lawful order from a law enforcement officer, or, and this is probably the big one, if you divert a law enforcement officer's attention.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, of course, they can claim that, yes, you can't interfere. Yes, that's correct. You can't interfere in a lawful investigation. However, that's a lot of nuance there, I can argue legally, saying, well, I'm just taking a photograph or I'm videotaping, and from a safe distance is not interfering with your investigation. And that's on the burden of the state to prove that. Remember, a strict scrutiny standard is a government burden, not a plaintiff burden.
Well, it's the government's burden, except when a cop comes up to you and snatches your phone.
Right, well, which would, I think would be illegal under the First Amendment and also government taking. But yeah, of course, there's a right for abuse. Of course, I understand that, and I hope the ACLU, if the law becomes ripe for litigation, if it passes, they sue right away.
Yeah, they are on this, Alejandro, and hopefully we'll see some motion. Alejandro, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. Dale in Springfield, Missouri. Hey, Dale, what's up?
Hey, Tom, you live in Portland. Go ahead and get naked. Nobody cares.
You're right. Just a couple of weeks ago, they had a giant naked bike ride here in Portland. I almost retweeted the video of it, and then I thought, people are just going to think I'm being salacious or something. But that's
you got to love Portland.
There's a lot of naked stuff going on in Portland. Anyhow.
Tom, you're 100% right in your rant about Democrats using their power.
For the filibuster.
The problem is our kinder and gentler. When they go low, we go high Democratic Party. H.W. Bush said we needed a kinder and gentler in politics, but the only ones that took that to heart were the Democrats. LBJ or even Bill Clinton wouldn't let someone like Manchin and Sinema get away with what they're pulling. The party got emasculated by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and I hate to say it, but even Michelle Obama. And it hasn't been the same.
Oh,
since.
Dale, it's all the women's fault, really?
No, it's
emasculated.
Not the women. It's,
Come on.
No, it's not
don't
the
give me that sexist male chauvinist crap.
No, it's the people they put in power at the time. I'm not blaming it on women. I'm blaming it on the people themselves.
Yeah, well, let's not use phrases like emasculated. But I'm saying my point is that the party is being crippled by Democrats getting in bed with billionaires. I mean, this is just it's so sad when you hear from these so-called problem solvers. It's like, oh my God. Dale, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Jerry in Palm Springs. Hey, Jerry, what's up?
Oh, hello, longtime listener and supporter, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that an inconvenient truth, you've been talking about climate change a bit this morning, came out in 2006 on June 30th. I looked this up on the computer on, what is that? One of these, where is that title? Well, anyway, that's where I looked it up. You remember the movie?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Al Gore came here to Portland, and I introduced him to a crowd of 5,000 people, and stood on stage with him for an hour taking questions. So yeah, I remember the movie really, really well, and it turned out it wasn't a good day for Al Gore, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, that movie is a big one. So it was 15 years ago, day after tomorrow.
Oh, by the way, it's cool here in Palm Springs. It's only 106. It was 123 the other day.
Oh, wow. Palm Springs. I have friends who live in Palm Springs. That's a fairly hot place. It definitely is.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm running away on Thursday to the ocean, and I'm going to stay there for 2 months.
Yeah. That's one of our kids and her family went to the seacoast here in Oregon over the weekend to camp out, because you get a little bit of wind off the Pacific, because the water's in the 50s, and the river here is in the 60s. So people all over in the Columbia River this weekend and the Willamette. Anyhow, whatever's on your mind, we can talk about 202-808-9925. I'll pick up your phone calls after the break. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. Thom Hartmann here with you, back with your calls after this. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact
that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Republican Party has sold themselves way back, all the way back to the 60s, really, as the serious party. We're the party of issues. We take stuff seriously. We have serious policy analysis. We have serious constitutional analysis. We are serious about the economy. We have all these think tanks, Heritage and Competitive Enterprise and Cato, and we've got the Federalist Society finding serious judges that we can put on the federal bench, and in response to 4 dead Americans, they got real serious. 5 House committees, 2 Senate committees. They created a separate House Select Committee for 4 dead Americans. That was Benghazi. Thousands of hours of testimony. The Secretary of State testifying for 8 hours straight. But when 5 people die at the Capitol, not so much. Got a new video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Rachel Bitecofer, the founder of Strike PAC and a contributor to The Cycle on Substack, and a pod host with the Election Whisperer. Strike PAC, STRIKEPAC.com is the website, and the Twitter handle is Rachel. Rachel, can you pronounce your last name for me? I want to make sure I get this right.
Sure, I married that monstrosity. It's Bitecofer.
Bitecofer. Okay, thank you. It's Rachel. The Twitter handle is Rachel, Bitecofer. And Rachel, you are just doing God's work. I mean, you predicted the blue wave election of 2020 down to predicting the, as I recall, the exact or maybe one-off number of seats that the Democrats would take in the House of Representatives. And now you're concerned about 2022. Tell us about this.
Yeah, and, I also predicted that Donald Trump would lose the 2020 presidential election about 16 months before the election, right? But one thing I got really wrong in 2020 was how Democrats would do down ballot. What they should have been doing is cleaning up, right? Not only not losing House seats, but gaining some additional ground, flipping some state legislatures, and also picking up a clear Senate majority. And as we all know, those things didn't happen, right? And my academic and research career has now transitioned into Strike PAC, which is what I'm calling the People's PAC. It's the answer to this idea that Democrats suck at messaging, that we lose winnable elections, and now we're up against a GOP 2.0. It's trying to end democracy as we know it, so we just can't afford any more mistakes.
So what specifically is wrong with Democratic messaging, and how do we fix it?
Yeah, so it's really crucial to iterate here that the messaging revolution that I've designed and have a team to implement is just one aspect of what Strike PAC is arguing we need to be doing, right? The things that should have gotten changed from 2016 to 2020 didn't get done by the status quo, and that's because the status quo is hanging really on to the old way of politics. The GOP not only has adapted, but helped push and invent the modern atmosphere that we're in with hyper-partisanship and polarization. Vote choice is almost completely locked in. We've seen an incredible increasing in strength of that over the last 20 years. And so therefore, election outcomes become about coalitional turnout, which includes, of course, each party's left or right-leaning independent part of the electorate. So we see people tuning in after Trump got elected from terror. That's a terror that the Democrats never intentionally stoked. They didn't make 2020 a referendum on the Republican Party's governance of COVID and their refusal to pass additional COVID relief aid. Starting in July, they were holding the HEROES Act. So it's like that kind of strategic, coordination, planning. We need a general for a war, and we're in the war, whether we want to be in it or not. They're fighting for keeps, and so we must too.
So if I'm participating with you in spreading a Democratic message that works as opposed to one that doesn't, what do I say? Right. What do I do? Other than going to strikepack.com and doing everything I can to help you in the work you're doing, which I've already done.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I'll tell everybody listening, this truly is going to rise or fall on the backs of everybody that's listening today and to other outreaches, because this is a status quo smashing project. It is basically saying, look, the where we need to tweak is not up in the limbs of the tree, it's down in the soil and the roots. We have to de-soil our entire election approach and switch it to what the GOP has been doing to us unassailed, unanswered for years, which is a branding war, right? We need to make each election a referendum on the Republican Party's brand and paint that brand in as negative a light as possible. And some of that is, as James Carville would tell you, really hanging the Jan 6 insurrection and the potential for coups and, anti-democratic movements from what I call a neo-fascist rising GOP majority. Some of it's that, but also it's about going and prosecuting the case against Reaganomics. This is not 1980 or 1990. We don't want people running around telling people they're fiscal conservatives, because that reinforces the fact that the GOP is better on the economy. And the fact is their track record, as you well know, Tom, I know this is a real area for you, is a total poop show, right? It's something that we should easily be able to assail and paint Democrats as the party of the middle and working classes, parties that are driving economic growth, job growth, Wall Street growth. I mean, it's always better under Democratic administrations. We need to be making that branding case and really coming after the GOP's brand.
We're talking with Rachel Bitecofer, the founder of Strike Pack, PAC. Strikepack.com is the website. You can tweet her at Rachel Bitecofer. A great article in Salon, by the way. She predicted the blue wave. Now she's trying to prevent a big red one that I also recommend to people. Rachel, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote an op-ed suggesting that whenever Democrats refer to the Republican Party or Republicans, they should always insert the word corrupt before that. Is my little attempt at establishing some branding. Thoughts?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, think about how coordinated and strategic the GOP is. They have everybody on message all the time, and that includes House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. When he talks about Democrats, he always inserts the moniker socialist, right? So they have so successfully branded us, because the problem that progressives especially make, and it comes from a true place in our hearts, is that we believe everybody's like us. We believe that people are informed and engaged and they care. And the truth is that the electorate has no idea what's happening. They don't understand anything about politics. They don't follow politics, may not even watch the news. And so reality is what gets painted for them when they get outreached by these media and messaging machines from the right? So what we really need to be doing is branding the Republican Party as GOP 2.0. Right? This is not your granddaddy's Republican Party. This is a party that's been overrun by extremists. There are basically no moderates left, and this is a statistical, quantitative fact, in the Republican caucus. And every time we're not talking about that, we're doing their bidding. And by that I mean, you know, they bait us with things like CRT, and we're happy to oblige by a month of conversation about the merits of it. That's not what we need to be doing. We need to be going on counter offense and forcing them to go on defense for the first time.
Right, and I think another brand for them might be white supremacist.
Oh, yes, absolutely. If people go onto the Salon piece, they're going to find 4 launch packet ads that I put together with my team that, you know, kind of exemplify elements of the strategy and messaging that Strike Back wants to impose. Again, it's a lot more than that. It's about delivery, too. We're really woefully inadequate at reaching voters where they are, which is in the digital space. But in any case, Fuse highlights the fact that the modal position in the Republican Party is that Joe Biden stole the election, is an illegitimate president, and they're telling us outright that what they want to do is return Donald Trump, a would-be dictator, into power. Right? He tried not only with the armed insurrection to stage a physical coup, but he used the Justice Department and tried to get the Justice Department to keep him in power. Like, this is a 5-alarm fire that we're having, and we need to be telling average people that because they don't know what's going on.
Right. We're talking with Rachel Bitecofer, the founder of StrikePack.com. Rachel, final question here. You predicted, as I mentioned in the opening here, you accurately predicted pretty much most of what happened, at least at a federal level in the election of 2020. Based on the way that you're compiling metrics and data, when you look at that same data set, or the June 2021 version of that data set, what do you see for 2022?
Yeah, no, I have built a reputation of telling people what they need to know and not what they want to hear. And here's the hard, cold truth. We have no idea what's going to happen to Democratic turnout now that Trump is gone. Trump was a natural turnout catalyst. He could have been even better if the Democrats had intentionally tapped into that angst and done what the GOP does, which is make every election about Obama and Pelosi, and now it's the squad and Sanders, right? So we did not do that. But now that natural catalyst is gone. And if we don't find, build something that is going to allow us to frame the election in those referendum terms and tap back into the angst that should definitely still be there in every voter, because we're in worse position in terms of our democracy today than we were back on January 20th, 2020, then we're going to be in real trouble, Tom. So, to me, the barometer that I'm watching is enthusiasm. How many Democrats relative to Republicans say they're excited to vote? And, some early indicators of that are concerning, like in California, where Republicans are twice as likely to say they're excited about the recall.
Wow. Rachel Bitecofer, the website, StrikePack.com. You can check it out. I just tweeted while we were talking, Rachel, the Salon article about you. And so if anybody wants to see that also, they can just look at my Twitter feed. And I should have tagged you in that. I'll do that as well. Rachel, thanks so much for dropping by. It's great talking with you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So here she is, one of the nation's leading experts on elections and election outcomes, saying essentially what I was saying in the first hour. We've got to get our act together, and we've got to go after these people. And welcome back. Let's see here. Bobby in La Puente, California. Hey, Bobby. Thanks for watching us on Free Speech. I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. You feeling okay? I see you're dried up. When I first seen you on TV, you looked like you were wet.
I was. Then
you're dry.
We finally found a fan, is what happened. In fact, Nate dug into the equipment closet here in the building and discovered there was this giant fan in there, and dragged it down here just as we were going on the air and fired it up. So we've got some air circulating in here. So yeah, my hair has dried out a little bit, but I'm still sweating. It's hot. It's hot. So what's happening with you, Bobby? And what's on your mind?
Well, here in California's drying up. This is real. This is real climate change. I know it from years ago, watching a documentary, the Kogi, a tribe in Peru, I guess. They told, the society, the white society, you're doing something. What are you doing? Because there was no snow when normally there's snow. So right there. where I live.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a San Gabriel River, right? People used to use it for recreational. Used to call it Marano Beach, sandy beach. There's no water. San Gabriel Mountains. Just the other day, it was a report, satellite report. Cogswell Dam drying up, which feeds the West Fork, Fishing dried up.
Oh, the Boulder Dam in Nevada is drying up. Or the Hoover Dam, excuse me. The Hoover Dam, yeah.
Yes. No, it's scary. Then we got these fascists. We got, short-term pain, long-term gain. But I'm saying we'll get through this. We have, with the fascists, you got the climate change, okay? And here in California, you just got to hang in there.
Yeah.
Hang in. And if you're doing your part, educating people, I'm grateful, honest. And,
I know
we just have to do it.
I know the Native American community is being hit particularly hard by this. There's a good piece, I believe it was in Common Dreams over the last day or two about this. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, I didn't hear that. Can you? Because normally I stay in touch with a buddy of mine, North Dakota. He's from the Yankton, and right now they're okay. We talk about planning. I got my garden going, and I got to call him and see what's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. But, and then, we just have to deal with it. Like living here, us, been living in this house 40 years, Tom, no air conditioning. How do we do it? Get a sheet, put it in the freezer, get a cold water or a block of ice, Tom, and that was our air conditioning.
Yeah.
That's the way we grew up, and we don't contribute to the global, the ozone with air conditioning. I used to hear that. So,
yeah. Well, that's good on you, Bobby. This morning, Sue Nethercutt, who does our newsletter, sent me a note. I was kind of complaining at her in email that it's over 90 degrees here in the studio, and she said, "Well, put a damp rag around your neck, or a damp cloth around your neck." And I was like, "Okay, A, I got no cloths, and B, I got no water." It's
hot water, right?
Yeah.
The cooler.
Yeah, but step by step, we'll get through this. Bobby, thank you for the call.
Yes, we will.
It's great to hear from you. It's always great to be in touch with you. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes. Well, it is 10 minutes before the hour. And I'll be back with more of your calls in just 1 minute. Stick around. Over at ThomHartmann.com, we have our newsletter, our regular newsletter that Sue puts together every day. It's got a link in it to every single article that I talk about on the air. So you can see, the backup for everything that I have to say. It's free. There's some ads in it that just, pay for it, basically. But that's it. There's that. And then, of course, over at HartmannReport.com, also no charge, there is our daily rant. So those are two things on the internet that we have. We also, periodically put up videos specifically for the people who are supporters of our program. And you can find our most recent one. It's about guns. This sheriff in Volusia County, the sheriff deputy there, asking the media, where have we gone wrong when a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy are having a shootout with deputies? And Texas passing this bizarre new gun law. Anyhow, it's all over at ThomHartmann.com. You can find it right there. Check it out. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. There we go, and welcome back. Are the computers freaking out, or was that? We'll find out. We will find out, right? Joy in Redding, California. Hey, Joy, thanks for listening to KFOI. What's up?
Hi, I heard some disturbing news. The Earth's axis is 16 to 18 degrees shifted to the right, and that's why the east is getting all those storms, and we have the drought.
I don't think the Earth's axis is, yes, it's the Earth does not tilt on a perfectly vertical axis relative to the sun, which is why we have seasons, or part of why we have seasons. It's also in an elliptical orbit. But I don't think this is a recent thing, Joy. But there is a what's causing this global warming is not anything that has anything that has to do with the planet or the sun or outer space or anything like that. Although the fossil fuel companies promote lies and disinformation, and it's all over the internet and particularly all over social media saying such things. But the simple fact of the matter is that since around the 1850 era, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, around the time of the American Civil War, we have been pouring carbon, mostly in the form of carbon dioxide, but also in the form of methane, into our atmosphere. And that carbon in the atmosphere acts as a blanket, and it holds the heat in that would normally radiate out into space. It would normally be reflected off the surface of the Earth. And the result is that the planet is heating up, and it's heating up insanely rapidly. And we're seeing the symptoms of it right here in Portland. And and we'll be seeing it more all over the country, and frankly all over the world. So Joy, check that out. And I think you'll find that what I'm saying is the fact. Joy, thank you for the call. John in Center Ospey, New Hampshire. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, how are you, Tom?
Good.
Actually, I had you on my big screen TV, man. I could see the beads of sweat coming off you.
Yeah, well, the fan is helping a lot, but.
Yeah, I don't mean to make fun of you. Really, I don't. Yeah. I don't. It's about 90 degrees here, so.
Yeah.
But anyways, I feel sorry for you guys, and you guys doing a great job considering the conditions. So.
Hey, at least it's not 100 in here yet, and at least we have air-conditioned homes to go home to. So it's not. This is not a disaster for us. But I'm telling you, there are going to be homeless people. There are going to be people sleeping out on the streets in this. In the Pacific Northwest, who are dying from this, and in my opinion,
also,
this is
California as well. I'm sure they're having a crisis in emergency rooms down there.
Yeah, and I just find it absolutely insane that the news media is going 24/7 disaster porn on a local Florida story. Yes, it's terrible, 150 plus people dead in all probability, but it's a local Florida story that probably has to do with local corruption, and we'll find out. And not talking about a national story and an international story, which is climate change, which is whacking, and frankly, I think it's going to kill a hell of a lot more than 150 people this year. So, but anyhow, back to you, John.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend of mine. I was going to discuss the Senate, but I was talking to a friend of mine who's a meteorologist, and he said a lot of the heat that is caught through the westerlies, I guess they call it the westerlies across the Pacific.
Right.
That China, all that pollution they're dumping into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, gases out California, and you guys get what they call the Earth radiation to radiate out the heat that the Earth collects.
Yeah.
It puts California on what do you call the heat blanket?
Oh, that's exactly what's happening, John. I'm not sure I would agree necessarily with the specifics of the mechanism, because it's not just China, it's the whole planet, right? And it's the carbon in the atmosphere, and it does not stay local. It travels over the entire globe. But I suspect, I'm just looking at the plants that we have growing around our house, and we've been watering them like crazy, and they're in heat shock. You cannot give them enough water. They just can't deal with 115 degrees. And I'm guessing, we had terrible wildfires here in the Pacific Northwest last year, and all down in California. I have a real bad feeling about the wildfire season this year. And last year it was so bad you could hardly breathe. So, if anybody in the sound of my voice is in the Pacific Northwest or in California and concerned about fires, now is the time to be ordering or picking up or buying your air filters and things, because, we went a week or two where Louise and I couldn't breathe, and we could not get an air filter. Everybody was sold out, from Amazon to the local stores. And, we need to get ready. this is like trying to adapt to a different planet while the billionaire, the fossil fuel billionaire network is continuing to block any kind of meaningful legislation that will change the amount of carbon that's going into the atmosphere here in the United States. And that's really what it's all about. They're blocking, they want to block Joe Biden's Build Back Better program, the Democrats' infrastructure bill, because, it's going to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, which they've become billionaires on. It's disgusting. John, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn, and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the two murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War, the other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
Clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University, the author of Trump on the Couch, as well as previous On the Couch books about Obama and Bush. His Twitter handle is Justin Frank MD, spelled just like it sounds. Dr. Frank, welcome back. Is it contagious?
Thank you, Tom. There's no such thing as a contagious psychosis.
Okay.
However, when a group of Americans, like that woman sitting behind Louise on the airplane, behave in a psychotic manner and become very outraged suddenly, it's because Trump himself has amplified and stimulated their already present psychotic anxieties. We all have some degree of psychotic anxieties that we know about when we suddenly go into a parking lot and think somebody, oh my God, where's my car? Somebody took it. Or we get anxious and get disoriented. But it really means that Trump is not doing his job as president, that he is stimulating paranoid fears that lurk inside of all of us, and he helps people organize those fears and suspicions against the news media and against our very democracy, despite numerous investigations that have shown no election fraud. So in this sense, psychosis may seem contagious. It's stimulated by a president whose normal job is to allay anxieties or calm them down in the general public. That's what Roosevelt did with his fireside chats. We all have anxieties, and a leader needs to help people manage them. Instead, Trump invites attacks on people wearing masks and, more importantly, on government institutions and elected officials.
Right, and less people...
This is dangerous, and it must be stopped.
Yeah, and lest people think they're listening to a best of because you're using the present tense. Let's use the past tense. He's a former president, and
former president,
but he is still trying to. Yeah, thank God. But he is still trying to crank people up. I mean, he was in Ohio this last weekend, reciting his lies, and had thousands of cheering people going, yeah, lock her up, etc. So how you said it has to stop? I agree with you. How do we push back on this? How do we help people, particularly friends or relatives? I have a cousin who, or a relative, let's say, not a cousin actually, but a relative who is ranting about Trump positively about Trump on Facebook, and I've just been like, I can't even touch this. What do we do?
Well, it's very hard because when a person has a fixed belief, you can't really argue with them. You have to find your way psychologically of sitting next to them and looking at their belief system and saying something like, I know you believe this. I really do. But I don't see it the same way as you. And could we talk about it? I really don't think it's the same. But I do know that this is what you feel and what you believe. And I'm taking it seriously. There needs to be a way to not become dismissive the way Trump followers are dismissive of the news media and dismissive of people like you and me, and certainly dismissive of elected officials. We have to find a way to sit next to people in a calm moment and not go off on them the way they go off on us. And that's a problem when somebody's on the airplane. You can't really do that, but it's important to know that we all give authority figures more authority than they might otherwise need, because we were all children once and our parents knew everything. And that's how it was when you're little, and then as you get disillusioned and you look to other leaders who have answers. And there's a real deep belief in somebody having the answers. And in this case, Trump has promoted that belief even after he has lost the presidency, but he's done it in promoting this incredible attack on our democracy on January 6th. And that is converting fears into actions, which is really extremely dangerous and needs to be stopped publicly. Somehow he needs to be shut up somehow. And I think his followers, it's almost like you have to deprogram people from a cult, the way the way people have done who've been in other cults.
Yeah, like there's
a yearning for this. And as I wrote in my book, he's the kind of person who, as a father, would scare the hell out of his children. Then they'd have night terrors, and he'd come in and turn on the light, and he would say, only I can make your fears go away. That's how he operates.
Yeah, and that's pretty much literally what he said in his inaugural address and in his campaigning. We're talking with Professor Justin Frank, psychoanalyst and clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University, the author of Trump on the Couch and the whole In the Couch books series, Twitter handle Justin Frank MD. Dr. Frank, one of the things that I didn't realize until I got to be an adult and an older adult, frankly, is that, and something that you just referenced, is that no matter how old we are, even people in their very elder years, we are all deep down inside little kids. That little child that we once were, we carry with us for our whole entire lives, and it makes us vulnerable to people like these authoritarians. And so I'm wondering, if when Trump was president, he was essentially stepping into the role of the nation's father, the nation's parent. Joe Biden fills that role right now for most people. And he's been doing, it seems to me, a spectacular job of saying, okay, let's just chill out here. There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't worry. We've got this under control. We're going to. So it seems to me that Biden's doing the right thing. And might that not be one of the most potent ways to dissipate the power that these wannabe autocrats, whether it's Trump or whether it's Rick Scott or Josh Hawley, or pick your wannabe fascist, neo-fascist here. Isn't that one of the best ways to handle it at the level of politics?
It's one of the best ways. Yes, I think that's a great point, Tom. It's one of the best ways of handling people's fears is what Biden is doing. He's doing a modern version of Roosevelt's fireside chats, and he is trying to calm people's anxieties. The problem is that Trump continues to say that Biden is not legitimate. Right. He was not elected. He should not be president. And I think that's where we get into big trouble. What Biden is doing as president, and more people understand that, is trying to allay our fears and anxieties in a very healthy way, speaking to the child parts of us that exist in all of us. Yeah. And that we need to believe that somebody has answers. I mean, the shock that parents don't have all the answers gets immediately relieved when you switch it to teachers or celebrities or other people you have trust in. In my practice, that's what I do as a psychoanalyst. People have fantasies that I have all the answers, which of course I don't. And what's great about Biden is he doesn't say he has all the answers. He is consistent and calming and being a really strong, stable parental figure that we have not had in this country in a long time, and I mean a long time.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, and I guess we need to acknowledge that and be grateful for it. But great advice, Dr. Frank. Thanks so much for dropping by and sharing this with all of us.
Thank you so much, Tom.
It's always great talking to you, and I got to tell you, to my listeners and viewers, Justin Frank MD is the Twitter handle. He's really worth following. Dr. Frank, again, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bye.
We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where despair is not an option, although the heat can get to us. But we're not despairing of that either. We will make it through. We'll be back. And welcome back. Paul in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I think that Citizens United is really one of the biggest roots of the problems that we face today, to legally bribe politicians.
Yeah, that was my op-ed today. And it really started actually in 1976 in a Supreme Court decision called Buckley, and then 2 years later in '78 in a decision called Bellotti. The Supreme Court legalized first billionaires in '76 and then corporations in '78 owning politicians. And now you've got companies like Toyota. I just tweeted about Toyota. They're saying that they're going to continue giving money to Republicans who want to tear down our republic, who support the insurrection. And I'm like, okay, I've owned a Toyota car for the last more than a decade now. It ain't ever going to happen again. That's it. I'm over it.
Yeah, and so I don't understand why, and I appreciate the fact that you put that out there today. Because, like I say, it's the root of the problem. So the corporations, first of all, suing a corporation does not change their behavior. They have the money.
Right.
I believe that by repealing Citizens United, we could hold people, the corporate executives who either held back the truth or bold-faced lied about science and as to the harmful effects of their products. The petroleum industry for sure, Roundup for sure.
Here's the thing, Paul. When the Supreme Court in '73 did their Roe v. Wade decision, it kicked off an enormous pushback that the Republican Party captured in 1980 when both Reagan and Bush decided to go from being pro-choice to being pro-forced pregnancy. And now, it's like a thing, right? The opposition to Roe v. Wade. When the Supreme Court doubled down on their Buckley decision in 2010 with Citizens United, there should have been a widespread eruption of rage coming out of the Democratic Party and progressives.
I agree.
And we have failed in that. And I've written 2 books about this. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and The Betrayal of America is the most recent one. And my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, again, ranting about these 3 now Supreme Court decisions. I guess if you add McCutcheon, 4 to Supreme Court decisions. That was in 2013. Where the court has basically said American democracy is now officially for sale. And whoever has the most money has the most speech. Whoever has the most money gets to decide the fate and future of America. It is the biggest challenge to doing anything about climate change. It's the biggest challenge to doing anything about racism and white supremacy. It's the biggest challenge to doing anything about, frankly, anything meaningful in this republic that might reduce the profitability of big billionaires and big corporations, or might reduce the ability of the Republican Party to hold on to power. I mean, they're even now, going after trans people and other people in the LGBTQ community, not because it affects their bottom line specifically, but because it gives them power, which they can then use to strengthen their bottom line by fighting things like climate change. It's and I don't think the average American gets this, Paul. I don't think they do. Yeah. And it's a tragedy. It's an absolute disaster. Anyhow, Paul, I got to run. Thank you for the call.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you. This is a BFD, as Vice President Biden might have said back in the day. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stick around. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Over at the Thom Hartmann website, thomhartmann.com, we have, the full podcasts and there's just a lot of information, and our newsletter. And the newsletter is extraordinary. It's free. Sue puts it together every day with her stack, and it's just great content. Links to every single article that I talk about on the air, and things that are peripheral to them as well. It's really worth the effort. And then, of course, at HartmannReport.com, there is my daily rant, which is typically incorporated into the program, but it's a written version of it, and that's also something that there's no cost for that at all. So you can check that out as well. Also, we've got a new video up about the dueling memes. If at first you don't succeed, try again, or the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Schumer is going to try to do what Harry Reid did in 2013 by forcing votes. Will it work? We'll see. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back, Susan in Longport. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Well, I just wanted to say it was a beautiful 80-plus degrees here in Wellport, but 116, 10 miles upriver.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're in Longport, Oregon.
Yeah, yeah, love it here. Oregon's lovely. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that woman who called in and talked about the polar wander. Earlier, I'm a geological oceanographer, and there was a study published in March of this year in the peer-reviewed Geophysical Research Letters, and it's talking about how the melting of glaciers and are pulling all of this groundwater up is causing the direction of the poles to wander and accelerate eastward.
Are you talking the magnetic pole or the physical pole?
Magnetic.
Yeah, okay.
I believe, yeah.
Because the magnetic pole is caused by the spinning of the Earth's largely iron core, is it not? I mean, I don't see how water would alter that.
It says the faster ice is melting under global warming would most likely cause for directional change of the polar drift.
Oh, interesting.
And was quantified in 2005 and 2012, but they actually go all the way back to 1990 now. But I mean, it's just like what we see with the crazy patterns of the jet stream, the slowing of the Gulf Stream, the fires. I mean, this is the existential crisis of our life, and I don't know how we're all going to make it out of it. Frankly, I'm terrified.
Yeah, we're hitting. Well, let's not be terrified. Let's try to get the country off its addiction to fossil fuels, even though we've got a bunch of billionaires who want to keep us addicted. It's like we're dealing with heroin dealers. Yeah.
Talk about the science.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Susan, well said.
Thank you, Tom, for all you do.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for your kind words and for the call. It's great to hear from you. Steve in St. Petersburg, Florida. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. First of all, two quick things, and then a summary statement about what you've been talking about regarding climate change.
Okay.
The first thing is that they tell us not to praise you to high heaven because you already know how good you are at what you do. But this statement is mostly for people that are new to your show. I can assure everyone, as a consumer of all types of media, podcast, NPR, mainstream, etc., that Thom Hartmann's show is objectively, provably, the most erudite, intelligent, factual, deep, and well-run show that you can hear. And
thank you, Steve. But what did you call about?
Right. Okay. Here's the deal.
Yeah.
I grew up in Pinellas County, Florida, and I'm 63. And what's done here is being done to the entire planet. It's not just hacking the climate. In my lifetime, a beautiful county, a huge county, bordering the Gulf of Mexico that was a tropical paradise, has been destroyed. The dolphins are gone, the manatees are gone, the fish are gone, the birds are gone, the trees are gone, the rain is gone. In its place is an urban, well, I won't go into what I really think. And this is what we humans do all over the planet.
Yeah, we've terraformed
and climate change is just one of our many powerful effects, and anthropogenic mass extinction is the real deal that the mainstream media will never mention.
Yeah, there was that book that came out a couple of years ago, and that caught the media's attention for about a week. But that's pretty much it. And you're absolutely right. And this ties into not just fossil fuel usage, but population issues, and population issues then tie into the exploitation and domination of women by men around the world. That's the principal driver of the population explosion. And I mean, there's just like layer after layer of this stuff. Yeah, spot on. Steve, I completely agree with you, and I'm so sorry to hear that that Pinellas County has been ruined. Steve, thank you for your call, and thanks for your kind words. That was thoughtful of you. Carol, hey, Carol, I just realized I only have 30 seconds. I'm going to put you back on hold, and I'll pick you up on the other side of the break because we're going to hit a break in just a moment here. And let me just amplify what Steve was saying. We need to learn how to live with the natural world. And when you look back at the history of a lot of indigenous cultures, what you find, and you see this in particular, I wrote a book about this called Threshold, with the Maori, for example, in New Zealand and in New Zealand principally, that they arrived, they wiped out the local ecosystem, and then figured out a way to live that was different, that was sustainable. And you find this across native cultures. We're going to have to do the same thing. we are going to have to figure out how to live in a way that is survivable, to use the earlier caller's word.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And if we fail to do that, if we fail to live survivably, we don't survive, and that's not a good thing. Back with your calls in a minute. Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, Amax, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry.
Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. The strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Just a reminder that my daily rants are published every day over at HartmannReport.com, and our podcast, our 1-hour podcast of the show, which is entirely free, is available through iTunes and all the normal places where you find podcasts. Cut down of our show. And that we post a weekly video over at ThomHartmann.com. And the one this week is about seditious conspiracy, U.S. Code 2384. And the argument I'm making is that this law, which imposes 20 years in prison to, by force, prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, end quote, is something that we should be seriously considering dusting off and applying to not just the people who showed up on January 6th, but the people who sent them there. Check it out, ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Yes, I am still here. It's Carol in Newark, New Jersey. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I know it's been a minute, but I was responding to the psychologist discussion about psychosis.
Yeah, Dr. Justin Frank. He's a psychiatrist. Yes.
Yes, I was just remembering something that I had learned in med school, so I just reviewed it quickly, and I was like, there are some psychoses that appear to be contagious. Like the person doesn't get a real psychosis, but they are taking on the person's belief. So when it's say, for example, a head of a household, or if there's a cult leader, somebody who is emotionally connected to a person with severe untreated mental illness who's dominant, while the person who is taking on the symptoms is passive and has a close connection to that person, but weak social connections otherwise, kind of like these folks that are isolated. Like, have you seen those videos of, I remember there was a middle-aged or elderly white man a couple years ago who was crying and talking about how he would die for Trump. I'm sure you probably saw that clip, like it was circulating a little bit. Like there's some people who are really nuts for Trump and feel very close to him.
Well, I think that's what Dr. Frank was saying, is that, you know, we all have a little bit of inner psychotic, and that what Trump does is kind of draws it out, amplifies it, expands it. It comes out and becomes, you know, a much bigger part of our personality if we decide to follow him. And, you know,
it's like, yeah, it's called shared psychosis. Shared psychosis.
Yeah, and in fact, when I first I was talking to Dr. Frank on Twitter a couple of days ago, and we were talking about his coming on the program, and I said, you know, is this contagious? And the example that he gave me, and I was surprised he didn't mention it this morning, was the Salem witch trials. You know, and that kind of whole thing of, you know, hey, let's kill somebody, right? Let's kill people that we live with, that are neighbors of ours. You know, it's like, you find psychotic behavior? Well, yeah, there it is right there. Carol, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Don in Watertown, South Dakota. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said about branding the Republicans. And I was thinking the letters GOP could probably stand for gutless, obstructive Philistines.
Yeah, or greedy old party.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd have to explain what Philistines means to Republicans.
Oh, yeah,
you know, that is
or the average American. Yeah, sadly,
complete lack of integrity or honor, or doing things the right way. So that just crossed my mind.
Well, it's a good one, Don. It's a good one, and I know that you know, I see people using or characterizing the Republican Party in different ways. The key, though, as Rachel Bitecofer pointed out, is that the entire Democratic Party, from national to local, from the president to the dog catcher, need to get on the same page in terms of branding the Republicans. And, you know, the Republicans have an infrastructure to make sure that that happens, and they have a way of enforcing conformity. The Democrats don't. And it is biting us in the butt. Don, thank you. I love it. Well said. Ivan in Bartlett, Illinois. Hey, Ivan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. What's up, brother?
I'm here.
Hey, the Republican Party is no longer the GOP. They are now the GQP.
Oh, that's a good one.
I started writing on Facebook and Twitter. I call them the GQP cult.
Yeah.
And when you're writing, don't put the G in capital letters. Put the G in small letters, Q in capital letter, and P in small letter, because sometimes Q looks like an O.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well,
so I'm calling them the GQP cult.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one too, Ivan. A lot of great ideas here today. Thank you. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to mention the you know, the law of conservation. Energy can't be lost or created. Can only be transformed in a closed system. Any type of alternative energy takes something from something, and the largest alternative energy.
Well, by the way, Bill, the exception to that is nuclear power, which converts matter into energy.
Well, but there was something from the energy in the atoms. I don't know. Anyway, hydropower, which is 70% of the world's renewable, a lot of it is polluting, and obviously when you take energy out of water, it does something. When the Chinese started flooding these valleys to create these hydroelectric plants, all those thousands of square acres of organic material ends at the bottom of a lake and starts to gas off as it decomposes.
Right.
And it may take 20 years for a project like that to stop gassing off enough methane.
Right, because all that vegetable matter starts to rot. You're absolutely right. The kind of energy, by the way, that a dam extracts from water is called kinetic energy. It's the motion of the water, which is fed by gravity, because water goes from high to low, and gravity is pushing it. So you're essentially taking the you know, the Earth sucks, right? You're taking the power of the gravity from the Earth on the water and converting that motion, that kinetic energy, into electricity with a hydropower system. But you know, you're absolutely right about the conservation of energy, with the exception of when you break down matter.
Right, but I think that the answer to all, because there's a limit to alternative energy, is to stop making stuff, stop making junk, stop wasting energy. And do you know what of a semi-precious stone called Fordite? You ever heard of it?
Yeah, but I don't remember anything about it. I recognize the word.
People discovered from the paint shops in these automobile plants that if they scraped it, there were layers and layers of enamel paint. And you can shape it, and you can get all these colored, like, they look like gemstones out of it. Mm-hmm. And a piece of that, like that's maybe 40 grams on a piece of jewelry, can go for $1,000. To me, that's the ultimate form of recycling. Taking a couple of grams of paint and doing that with it.
Yeah, I get it. And recycle. We need recycling. I mean, it's, and increasingly you're seeing things that are available. The thing that immediately popped in my mind. We've got 2 dogs. Is the doggy poop bags now are decompose rapidly. They make them out of cornstarch. And or some variation on that, and so after 6 months in a landfill or whatever, it's they turn to whatever it may be. But
Tom.
Yeah.
But one last thing, people seem to not understand, and Bill Maher made this mistake too, that sunshine is the best disinfectant. Well, the only UV light that kills viruses and stuff is the ultraviolet C.
Right.
And
UVC.
none of that reaches the Earth because it combines with oxygen in the upper atmosphere to create ozone layer.
Yeah. You're right. Although you can get it from UVC tubes, but they can also those disinfecting tubes can also burn the back of your eyes. So you got to be very careful with them. Bill, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. It's coming up on 44 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's 100 degrees now in Portland. It just hit 3 digits, 100 friggin' degrees. Amazing. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Sean says it's actually 102. And, yeah, we'll see. And welcome back. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I got 2 things on my mind. One is the climate, but I'm going to let that rest. Tom, I think that right now, I don't believe Kamala Harris is doing an adequate job on the immigration. Kamala, yeah. And I'm a Democrat. And I'm looking at this, and I think this is the straw that will break the camel's back in the next election. That if we don't get comprehensive immigration back on the table and get the Republicans engaged in this one way or another, that it's going to be to our detriment as Democrats.
I don't disagree with you, Randy, but the Republicans are never going to go along with anything that might help America for which Democrats or the Biden administration could take credit.
Ignoring immigration, and this is my point, is that they have said this story that these immigrants are paying $7,000 to get to or get across the border, when people in America, in our sinking ship, as it appears at times, are living hand to mouth and fearing eviction. So
I don't know where you got that $7,000 number from, Randy.
Well,
that's
I've heard
absurd.
that several times. I've heard it several times.
Yeah, well, you're not finding poor people in Guatemala who are coughing up $7,000. Yes, there are some coyotes who transport people, and there are high-end coyotes who will smuggle people into the country as well. But the vast majority of people who come here are not paying anybody. They are poor, and they are literally fleeing for their lives. They are terrorized.
How do these poor people get the Joe Biden T-shirts then after when this new wave started?
Some Republican handed it to them. Randy,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Randy. We've talked many times, but, take that racist crap someplace else, please. Christopher in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Christopher, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call, and I'm glad you have a fan. Hey, I have two things on my mind. One is that we were, locking down because of the heat, and guess what movie was available? Soylent Green.
Oh, jeez.
Think about that.
Flash from the past.
Exactly, and also, but it was the year that it was happening was 2022.
Oh, really? In the novel?
Yeah.
That's
yes.
Where, in the movie. That's where it takes place. That's next year.
In the movie, yes, and you couldn't breathe the air. The population explosion.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of issues that seem to be hitting today.
Yeah.
And it was just. I said, God, this was a perfect storm for that film to be on HBO Max, and I would suggest your listeners watch that film because it was just amazing. We're going through all this right now. Almost,
I'm not sure I ever actually watched the movie. I remember it happening. It was like in the 70s, wasn't it? It was a long time ago.
Yeah, Charlton Heston. You have to. But you can see it on Prime or HBO Max. But it's being deleted at the end of the month. And
really?
So it was just amazing that happened. And one other thing.
Quickly.
Should you be vaccinated to vote?
Ha! Yeah, that would make them crazy, wouldn't it? I got no problem with that.
Zombies do that.
Yeah, Christopher, I got to run, but thank you. Yeah, we need vaccine passports. Maybe not to vote, but certainly if you're going to hang out in my space, I want to know whether it's on an airplane or a bus or just, in a restaurant. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So in addition to having our daily rant over at HartmannReport.com and the newsletter, Sue's newsletter that has links to literally every story we talk about throughout the show over at ThomHartmann.com, and you can sign up. It's free. We also push out a video to people who are supporters of our program at ThomHartmann.com every week. And the one that goes out this week is about Loudoun County, Virginia's public schools. There is a group that is opposed to teaching critical race theory. It's called PACT, Parents Against Critical Theory. And they've been promoting the work of a guy who was among the people who marched in the so-called Unite the Right rally, where Heather Heyer was killed. The Jews will not replace us, black people will not replace us march. And he's just like making stuff up. It's really a remarkable, remarkable story. You can see the whole thing over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Angela in Baltimore, Maryland. Hey, Angela, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon. I know I have to be quick. I've seen a clip of a congressional hearing from 1988. Al Gore probably chaired it. It was a Senate hearing on climate change. These people have known this since 1988. I've also come across articles where that have said that LBJ knew about what this was doing to the environment. But my point is, we've all done this to ourselves. The government let us down. The oil companies are greedy, and it's just going to get worse. And I'm just really angry about it, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, what we need to do is we need to support progressive candidates who are willing to take on the fossil fuel industry. And that's not...
I do that, but it just feels like it's too late.
It's too late for the not going to kill us all consequences, but it's nowhere near too late for the it could kill us all consequences. But my fear, Angela, is not that we're all going to die from climate change. I think that's kind of an exaggerated fear. My fear is that it's going to destroy civilization.
Yeah, a couple of calls ago, the guy called from Florida said the manatees are gone, the fish are gone, the vegetation is gone.
Yep.
I mean, it just angers me that both Democrats and Republicans have done this to us for money.
Right, and now we have in the United States literally the only major political party in the world, in the developed world, that says that climate change isn't a thing, that denies climate change. Literally no other country on earth has anything like the Republican Party that denies climate change, which is just absolutely breathtaking.
You don't have time for me to give my opinion on the GOP.
Okay. Well, Angela, I've got to move along anyway. Thank you so much for your call, and spot on. I can't disagree with anything you said. Judd in Las Vegas. Hey, Judd, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Long time since I've been able to get through. Very hard.
Yeah, well, thanks for the call.
Yeah, I'm a truck driver. You know, I'm actually I told you once about California Now. You know, if he won and we could all break away, and you know, Now stood for Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. You know, that would be our new country. But I had to move to Arizona in order to find a place to park my truck where I could go home and be home. Anyway, I wanted to get in on the thing about the GOP.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for years I've told people, you know, voting, it's like driving. All you do is, you know, you want to go forward, you put it in drive. Always look for the D, right?
Yeah.
And the R, of course, what does that stand for? Reverse. Okay, but now I'm just convinced, you know, with all those Republicans who went to the what was it? They went to Russia on the 4th of July and all that.
Yeah.
You know, the R no longer stands for Republican; it stands for Russian.
Yeah, can't argue with that one. I mean, just look at Ron Johnson and his buddies, and Rand Paul. I mean, you know, they all made that pilgrimage to Russia on the 4th of July.
And now I got to figure out. We got to find who. I'm trying to find somebody who can run against Gosar, because now I live in his district.
Oh my, that's incredible.
I'm in a place called Meadview, Arizona. It's a small little vacation or little retirement town. You know,
so you're no longer in Las Vegas, Judd?
No.
Okay.
You know, I'm only home for a week at a time. You know, because I'm on the road usually driving.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So how do you spell your town?
Meadview, like Lake Mead, MEAD. Diew.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I actually was able to buy a place down there last summer, and I no longer have to rent and have a roommate who complains about coming to get me from a truck stop or wherever. And
yeah, I get it.
So now I can be home when I want to go home. I just go home.
Yeah, well, that's nice. Judd, I gotta move along, but thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you again. Thank you. Philip in Neenah, Virginia. Hey, Philip, what's up?
Neenah, Wisconsin, but my area code is from
Wisconsin.
Virginia. But hey, Tom.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Hey, I just wanted you to draw a distinction between one of your earlier callers talked about a vaccine passport for voting, and you had mentioned public transportation, and then the last distinction you made was restaurants. You feel more comfortable. Yeah, and I just think that is more of a luxury, and I was curious if you thought there was a distinction between, like, public transportation to get to and from places you need to be, and like going to a sporting event or a concert or a restaurant, which I see as a luxury.
Well, those are luxuries. Those are things that people who don't have discretionary income can't do. But the reason why I think it's so important to do it that way, beyond just giving people who can't afford to do it a feeling of safety, is that when you learn, you know, it's like stores have signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service. So people put on their shoes and they put on a shirt before they go into the store, even if they've been walking around without a shirt or without their shoes. They put it on because they know that that's what they've got to do, which means that they have it available to them. If on a widespread basis across America, businesses that do business with the public in a big way, you know, retail stores, restaurants, sporting events, things like you mentioned, if they were to simply start saying you can't get in here if you're not vaccinated and you can't prove it, and the vaccine passports are free and the vaccine is free, that's going to cause a lot of people who might not otherwise even go into a restaurant, who can't afford to go to a restaurant, but who might someday want to go to a restaurant with somebody who can afford to take them to a restaurant, or whatever. To get vaccinated, and it reestablishes a social and cultural norm. You know, our social and cultural norm is that you don't walk into a restaurant or into a store, half naked. Well, how is being unvaccinated different from being half naked? That's my point, Philip. Philip, I got to run, but thank you for the call. I got your point. I totally get your point. Thanks so much for being with us today. Hopefully our building will get their air conditioning fixed tomorrow, although I'm not optimistic. From what I'm hearing, if you try and call an air conditioning company here in Portland, the phone just rings and rings and rings because this city is in deep dry. It's over 100 degrees, like I said. Anyhow, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, get out there and get active. Check out strikepack.com, Rachel Bidikofer's piece. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.